Good morning, everyone. This is a presentation on the street and the built in Pinna village as an effort to arrive at a definition for Agrorban. As the term explains, the word Agrorban is the urban of agricultural areas, a term which we wish to use for villages. Now, in the Pinna village, which is one of the old villages of the district of Muzaffarnagar, we have certain reminiscences of traditions which are so much of the traditions of people and lifestyles which have still not been hit by extreme urbanization and economy centric development. So that is why we have tried to do a documentation in this village on how houses and roads and open spaces get together to form a composite cluster, which we found to be very different because of the sense of ownership, because of the sense of use, and because of the sense of belonging. Now, when we look at a village, then the subdivision of land is primarily out of level differences and long sustained ownerships or historic reasons beyond comprehension. There is no pre-planned layouts, but the interactions of people become spaces. Roads are shaped through the participatory development of one dwelling with the other and the other with the third. Whereas in cities, roads are there before the owners come. Ownerships of people are only on the plots, whereas in a village, the ownership of the plot is up to the central median of the road. So the responsibility for the road and the ownership and the sense of maintenance, belonging, everything is happening through the area of the house. The owner owns half of the road in front of the house. That is a straight measure at drawing roads, increasing the number of movement areas, and so on and so forth. It is because of this part ownership of the public areas, because of which the community feeling is very strong also. And with a strong community, the house is not as strongly shielded from the public areas as it is in the cities. There are not too many huge gates. Even if there are gates, they are open almost throughout the day and the night. There are small chabutras, deoris, dehelis, and even small lines which are drawn to limit the house. Now, there are a lot of illustrations which explain how beautifully the urban is interlaced, unified, and flexible. This is an illustration of the difference in between the plotting, the difference in between the way plot type is there in an agricultural land and a plot type is there in a urban. We all know these Khasra maps, but a closer look at the map shows that the geometry and the harshness of division is missing in a village land, in an agricultural land. All pieces of land which were pre the planning era were all like this, you know. So any planning land is land which is bought out of all agricultural lands and, you know, converted into a plan like the plan that we use. But there is a deficiency in this kind of an intervention. The ownership loss and the community loss is having a reason, and that reason is evident here. This is an example of the difference comparatives in between the city, which is the diagram below, in terms of the harsh clarity of spaces with no overlaps, and the kind of complete meshing of different kind of space in terms of semi-public, semi-private, and semi-private spaces, and how that visual continuity is there completely. So while trying to define agro-urbanism in terms of the structure of open spaces, we wish to highlight a few points. which the first of which is that every village structure is unique. This uniqueness is not seen as much in the planned sectors of our country. It has its own needs and aspirations and depends on the individual. Another aspect of agro-urban is that it is human-centric. You know, when a letter goes to a village, then the letter is named by the name of the person to whom the letter is addressed. And then the next thing that is written is his father's name or his grandfather's name and the name of the village. The letter reaches the person. Here, it is different. When a courier or a letter arrives, the name has to be written, the lane has to be written, the house number has to be written, the sector has to be written. So nobody knows the person, but everybody knows the sector. Inside a sector, everybody knows the lane name. Inside the lane, everybody can guide you to the house. But would they know that I live in that house or you live in that house? It's very rare. So agro-urbanism is something which is born out of ownerships and born out of an importance to human beings. Then the next is that agro-urbanism is based on agro-based economic regions of our country. It cannot be called a village urban or a rural, as neither explains the complete meaning. Urban, explained and understood by the physicality of nodes, edges, landmarks in design, is merely output based. It's too physical. Agro-urban is a process-driven urban and ownership-driven urban, which leads to common benefit. The economic dominated settlement congregations known as cities, where there is high consumption of produce and a better exchange of commodities, have definitely adopted the word urban. But since the word urban cannot be taken to the village, that is why the word agro-urban justifies the predecessor of urban, which otherwise the village is, because at some point of time, village was the urban that the urban is today. For a better economic association of the word, agro-urbanism or urbanism of agro-based settlement is used. So this is the basis of the word. And if I make a comparison between the two, then we can illustrate step by step how nodes and landmarks and edges are physical approaches, and function-centric approaches are there, and people-centric approaches are there in agro-urbanism. How technology and automobile dominant built is there in urbanism, and how interconnectedness of cause and effect between built, economic, social, and cultural is there in agro-urbanism. How the built is the end of a process, is permanent, and houses economies in urbanism. Like built is, a mall, a house, a factory, a bank, a school. So it's built to house economies, and how the built is flexible and works as an aid to invisible processes and not the end of a process. So how in urbanism open spaces are managed and owned through, and how the open space ownerships are there through individual build. That is the biggest difference. How mechanization is an approach in urbanism and how humanizing approach is there in agro-urbanism. How socio-cultural independence of economic climate is there in urbanism, and how socio-cultural activities connected to economy and climate is there in agro-urbanism. How urbanism is unlimited in sprawl, and how an agro-urban pocket size is the size of it's a limited population, because you can know only a limited number of people. In your memory, you can know only a limited number of families. A limited number of groups can live together, not unlimited. So a village cannot be the size of Delhi. Delhi cannot be a village, but Delhi can house many villages. An urban can house many agro-urbanisms. So a village and agro-urbanism is more of a model. In urbanism, the built surrounds the green. So green is the sea, and the built is an island. So, but in agro-urbanism, built is surrounded by. Sorry, I made a mistake. So in urbanism, built surrounds the green. So green is an island, and the sea is that of built. But in agro-urbanism, it's just the reverse. The green is the sea, and the built is a small island. In agrourbanism, there is an aspiration of all urban because of the environmental prosperity as explained through green city, garden city, and sustainability. While in the case of agro-urban, urban is the aspiration because they feel that it's economic prosperity. So the relationship is very strong when we come to this point because the agro-urban is continuously aspiring to be urban, and the urban is continuously weaving models of a better city by calling it agro-urban or by addressing the issue of agro-urban. Then urbanism is build-centric and thrives on isms. Agro-urbanism is green-centric and thrives on layers. Where urbanism is nature of urban has undergone recent transformations. Urbanism was based on security, which was through forts, but in the last 200 years, it is economy based, while agro-urbanism has followed the same pattern since time immemorial. So urbanism is too young as compared to the age-old agro-urbanism. The individual ownership leads to roads in urbanism, whereas roads lead to individual ownerships in agro-urbanism. In urbanism, anonymous communities use of address to reach a plot, a house, or location, as I had said. And in agro-urbanism, an individual is important. The name of a person, people might know your great grandfather also, you know. So there is a very different urbanism when you want to understand the behavior of villages. The growth and the selection of materials is very slow. A house is built over generations. A house or a plot starts with maybe stacking and collecting of bricks in one season, and then earning in the next season for buying cement and steel, and then taking a loan and investing your own energy to put up your house together. Then the house remains unplastered, then you get gates made. So whatever is arising, whatever you see as a build in a village would have been a work of a lifetime, or it would have taken generations, as against the speed-centric urbanism.
As seen in these photographs, we can see that the village roads and houses are not two separate entities. The street in between the houses is merely an interconnector, not an road for the rushing vehicles like a bike or truck or car to run. Most of these spaces are so well connected that you can't differentiate whether you are inside or outside the house. As seen through the behavior of the lifestyle of the people, we can see that the road and house are connected through a plinth area, which is generally called chabutra, mundir, or dahliz, which is at a small rise from the street. There is no harsh boundary between the street and the house, and which also in most of the cases is absent. As evident through all these slides and the interconnection expressed, we can see that the material which is mostly used in these cases are soft material, either a brick khadanja or a mud road. But with time, development happens, and these material changes to concrete road or cement paved blocks or a bituminous patch, making it a non-porous and impervious patch. The original feel of the road is very tactile, and it is rough and porous.
So now, whenever we look at the built and the open in the case of agrorban clusters, we see that they are meshed with each other as if it's tooth to gear. It's all so well done with each other that it cannot be separated. You take off the built and the open space gets destroyed. Whereas the open space here is defined and too geometricized for the automobile. rather than the human being. Now, when we are talking about open spaces, then we have taken the example of only the street here, which because we have been seeing the connection between the build and the movement area. So if you see how the words for streets evolve in the local dialects of India, which are primarily or were housed from the village and are not English words, as compared to the associative values in the case of uh, you know, as compared to their associative values, then we realize that it, in the case of the local dialects and languages, the words used have got more depth and more scale, and they have got a definitive definition because of which a street or a road can be, through which the street or a road can be seen. जैसे कि हिंदी में पग, पगडंडी, मुडेर, पथ, डगर, मार्ग, राह, रास्ता, खुला पोत, आश्रय, राजमार्ग. Now there are so many scales, and not just scales, there are so many textures in this. When you talk about gali, kucha, guhargaz, sadak, rasta as in Urdu, then it is not just, scales, but when you talk about associative words like guzargah, means the house of the journey. There are such beautiful notations through which people address open areas as compared to the singular dimension of scales of movement areas in English, which I don't say that English villages did not have it, but maybe the language did not carry it to us. Or maybe there is so much more in the village dialect, like in Bengali, Pathir, Rasta, Raha, Soroni. It does not carry too many scales, but it refers to so many textures, and the stimuli is very tactile. When you look at the Sanskrit root words, Vithi, Vithika, Vishikha, Grahashreni, Rathya, Parirathya, and so on and so forth. So then there is a mathematical notation can be seen to be attached to the language, because there the intent of the road is also there. And at the root of languages, there was a comprehension is very nice to be seen in Sanskrit. So with all these scales, we can say that in the local dialect, the addressing of textures, the addressing of, the kind of roughness of the road, where the road is, like a pagdandi is there in between the fields. Now, a mundair is, you walk on a mundair also. Mundair is a mud wall. हल्की सी मुंडेर होती है, उसके ऊपर लोग चलते हैं. So path is also not just a road, but also the path of life. So, marg is not just a road, but also a way to find out things. So the multiple use of the word, not just for addressing a road, but also for different life conditions or different solutions or different purposes, also illustrates that a physical feature with textures, with application in definitive areas, has permeated to better purposes. What more does an urban want? And that urban here in the case is Agrorban. So now this is how we conclude the whole discussion, starting from where we talked about the way the open and the built is enmeshed together, where we compared Agrorban with urban. And then we made an etymological comparison, and then we saw these case documentations from the village in Muzaffarnagar. And these conclusions can be that the land division between public land and private land, as in the case of fresh development through plotting and planning, is the main reason of lack of ownerships and the development of virtual communities in metros and the urban in which we live today. We lack the academic outlook to address India's Indianness, which is so strongly stated in the NEP. And to develop that academic outlook, we will have to actually rethink and to address to the roots. And our profession must do it, because it's largely on us. We have the intersemiotic capability to see things from different perspectives and through different frames. India is a welfare state, and environment and social justice, two important facets of development theory, cannot be misjudged or misconducted in the absence of knowledge. Our absence of knowledge cannot do wrong to people, who are living in our villages. That is what this point means. And Agrorban should be recognized and deeper studies conducted so that we don't apply all that is urban into the village and think that we are doing good to the villagers. So this is how we end this discussion. It was Anand Khatri and Ritik Gupta together to put this paper together for the AFM 2021 conference. Thank you, Jamia Millia Islamia.